welcome to Getting Your Money's Worth, the show that focuses on value. I'm Judith West, and our guest today is Joel Block, psychologist, professor of psychology at Albert Einstein, and author of Naked Intimacy. Okay, thanks for being on Getting Your Money's Worth. This show is about getting your money's worth. And the topic is a little unorthodox for getting your money's worth, but we live in very unorthodox times now. We live in times that people are troubled economically. And as a matter of fact, folks who would like to get divorced, would like to separate, would like to start a different life, may not be able to afford to do so.
Right.
And strange though it may seem, in fact, to tell you the truth, isn't it really true that most of the time divorce is not very practical economically?
Divorce is most of the time a disaster.
A disaster,
okay.
Economically, for sure.
Well, it's disaster
or
emotionally.
Period. Okay, fine. So I want to introduce the topic, and then because you talk about living peacefully, I'd like to segue a little bit into maybe living peacefully and avoiding the divorce. But let's just talk about those folks who are constrained economically, that have made up their mind that split they want to do. What can they do to make their quality of life peaceful until they can reassess their economic condition?
Well, first of all, if someone is really considering that, the first thing I would ask them is, what have they done to see if they can repair the relationship?
Okay.
Because you're talking about living together separately. It's stressful. To me, it's a relatively short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution.
Right.
I think that if people are living together and they really want to not be together, and they do that over a long term, I think they can end up sick in one way or the other. But if they are going to do that, even in the short term, the first thing to do is talk to the children, because there's going to be a different living arrangement.
Right.
So we're talking about the usual. It's not your fault in terms of the kids.
Okay, so let's just go down these steps. And in no way is this program proselytizing divorce, but the fact remains that there are situations. So if you are in that situation, and some of these things, honestly, that you're talking about can work both ways. Talk to the children. Be sure they know whatever is going on in the marriage is not their fault.
Right, and in addition...
How do you do that in a short period of time? What do you say? Hey, guys, we're getting married, but it's not your fault?
We're getting divorced.
Or we're getting divorced.
No, what we're going to say is that Mom and Dad have done their best to get along, and it's not working. It has nothing to do with you, but we're going to have a different kind of arrangement with each other. And then there is some things to talk about, so they understand we're going to be sleeping separately, and we're going to do the best we can. Everything's going to be the same for you. You're going to be okay. Okay,
so you went on to say, so obviously if folks are forced to live together for economic reasons and they don't want to, or maybe they want to try a separation on their own. I mean, I could see how this might even bring harmony back if it's done carefully.
You mean a separation where they actually separate?
Yeah, and separate in the house. Maybe. So you're saying certainly sleep separately.
They're going to sleep separately. They have to have a bunch of agreements. One of the agreements is how are they going to deal with each other around the children. And that, to me, they should define it, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that, and they should sign it.
You mean make a contract?
Yeah.
Really? A written contract almost?
The adults generally are going to go on with their lives one way or the other. The children are vulnerable. Children, to me, are like prisoners of war. Their well-being is in the hands of their captors. So I have a very strong feeling about that. My mother was married 3 times. I was a stepchild twice. I have some experience with that.
So you've had some personal experience with that.
Yeah, I had experience with when people didn't get divorced.
Yeah, well, I don't want to digress. I want to keep on this. But if you had to choose, and this is probably not, it's a tough question, is it better to be a child in a household of disharmony, or is it better to be a child of divorce?
I would say, actually, looking at the research, that actually it's better to be a child of divorce. Because the disharmony, there are 3 ways that you can screw up a child's life, 3 major ways. 2 of them are written about a lot, and 1 I wrote about a lot. One is if there's chronic fighting. So for example, I know a woman who, when her parents fought, she used to hide behind a couch because it was that scary for her as a child. Right. So it's chronic fighting. Worse than that, actually, is withdrawal, the cold marriage, where 2 people are living together and it's icy. Not they had an argument and, for a couple of weeks or even a couple of days. And I'm talking about, for example, here's an example. This is a weird example, but it's a true example. This woman throws out her husband's running shoes. For 15 years, I know it's weird, for 15 years, the only talking he did to her was like, pass the pepper. That's it.
Right.
He was that freaked out about this. So withdrawal, actually, even in a marriage that people want to save, withdrawal is a kiss of death.
Kiss of death, right.
And then the third thing is, and this is the part that people don't really write about, and that is drawing the children in. People write about drawing the children into a divorce, taking sides, but what about a marriage that's basically intact, but one parent is favoring the child, wants the child's support against the other parent? There's a whole bunch of things
or
that could happen there.
bad-mouthing.
Yeah.
Bad-mouthing the...
Oh, did you know that your mother was out late last night?
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're in a situation. So we're at a point now where we're talking about people living together peacefully, and actually, not just in planning divorce, but also in marriage divorce. Tell me something. Do you have? You gave some tips for living. But do you have some tips for finding contentment in marriage? Is there a set of tips that you can give us?
Well, I can give you a bunch of tips, but let me tell you a little story.
Okay.
Some years ago, probably at least 20 years ago or more, there's a college professor who wrote a book on behavioral marital therapy. And what's that? That has to do with a lot of behavioral kinds of stuff, exchanges. So for example, I'll wash the dishes and you'll do something for me. Those kinds of things. So he wrote the book. He did a lot of research. Then he did something very unusual for a scientist. After several years of doing a lot of research, he was a professor, had to do the research. Right. After several years of doing the research, he did a follow-up, and nothing that he did worked. So you and I made an exchange. You'll do this and I'll do that. But now it's a year or two later, and you're still doing what you do, and I do what I do.
Right.
So, and I used to correspond with him and argue with him about this.
Right.
And then what he did was he wrote a book called Acceptance. I don't know if that was the exact title, but Acceptance Therapy. And unfortunately, he died before the book came out. But acceptance therapy is that I'm not here to fix you, and you're not here to fix me. So if you want to have a really satisfactory relationship, this is me. Accept me as I am, and I'm going to do the same for you.
All right,
that means a lot.
That means a lot, but let's just stop right there. That's well and good. Accept me as I am. But that's not a marriage. A partnership, by nature of being a partnership, requires some compromise on both sides. Mm-hmm. No one can live independently my way, and you live independently your way, and yet will be a marriage, a household. It just doesn't work. And in my opinion, I don't have your thing, in my opinion, but having had consumer opinion of being a married person, there are certain compromises that it's fair and almost obligatory to expect your spouses to partake in.
Well, the thing about it is, I'm not disagreeing with you. It depends what it is. It could be a slippery slope. I am a classic introvert.
Right.
Frankly, I prefer spending time by myself than with most other people.
It's unusual for a psychologist, isn't it?
Well, I'm not crazy about people.
Okay.
I like dogs, but they're loyal.
Are you sure we have your pedigree right?
Are people going to see this?
Yeah, right.
But the other thing about it is that it depends what you're talking about. When I said that, that's my temperament. Now, if I was married to someone who was basically saying to me, we have to go out a lot, we have to socialize all the time, that's something a little bit different than her saying to me, you know what, it would be nice if you turned off the TV at a certain hour and we can go to bed together or something like that. I don't have to change my personality for that. Those kinds of compromises work, but some people want the other person to be a different person.
Well, that's not a compromise.
But that's common.
But I do believe that oftentimes you get in marriage, a woman sees a guy and maybe he's a gambler, whatever he is, and she thinks that marriage will reform him, or he sees someone who's a spender, a shopaholic, and he thinks marriage is going to reform her. Right. That reform doesn't work so well.
No, it works well if you're a divorce lawyer.
Right. So, but let's go back to, we talk about getting your mindset and quality of life here. The facts remain that, and as a matter of fact, marriage is diluting. Is there a difference? Do you see a difference, Joel, between people who are in long-term partnerships and people who are in marriages?
You know what? No. If you're in long-term partnerships versus marriage, in marriage you had to pay for a wedding and then aggravate each other. And then in long-term partnerships, you don't have to pay for the wedding. You can aggravate each other for less expensive.
And you can walk out.
Actually, let me mention something about that. There used to be a difference with that.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I'm still growing up, but back when I was growing up,
I'm joining you in that, but okay.
Okay. Back then, no one got divorced. So living together arrangements were much less common. Now you're talking about a situation where people get divorced a lot.
Right.
At least half the people get married.
Right.
So in terms of commitment, there isn't really a difference between people who are living together, say with children,
yes,
and people who are living together and are married with children. There isn't enough of a difference. I haven't seen it clinically, and I haven't seen research that dissuades me from that position. It's about the relationship, not about a document.
So, right, exactly, and which kind of, and marriage is diluting, which kind of brings us to the next topic. This business, I want to go back to this business of living together peacefully. Mm-hmm. Can it be done?
I think it can be done, but I don't think it can be done by everyone. So, and I also don't think it's a long-term solution. So other things that have to be done.
Right.
One, you have to have some agreement in terms of how the bills are going to be paid.
Right. Which is okay for marriage too.
Yeah, yeah.
Privacy.
But in marriage, in say a full partnership, it's easier.
Yeah.
But you're talking about we're now living separately together.
Right.
I'm paying some bills. We have to divide this. Where in a lot of marriages, that's not the case.
Right. Correct.
So there's the bills, there's household responsibilities, and just in terms of who's cleaning up and so on.
Privacy.
We'll get to that. There is also, very importantly, responsibility for the children. Right. When am I on?
Okay,
when is my partner on?
We have 1 minute left. Let's set some up.
Okay.
Of all those tips, what's the most important thing to do? This contractual arrangement?
The most important thing to do is to protect the children.
Is protect the children.
That is how you are dealing with each other in front of the children. You have to have an agreement because there are going to be some disagreements. And I believe that those disagreements have to be aired away from the children.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Thanks for being on Getting Your Money's Worth. I don't want to cut you short. But I also do want to recommend your book, Naked Intimacy, How to Increase Openness in Your Relationship. And I have to say, I read it. I think this works if you're trying to keep the marriage going happily, and if you're thinking about not, I think this works too.
Okay.
Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
You're watching Getting Your Money's Worth. I'm Judith West. Thanks for watching.